You know, sometimes life hits you with a curveball so fast, so unexpected. It doesn't just knock the wind out of you, it shatters your entire world into a million tiny, unrecognizable pieces. And for me, that curveball didn't just come from one direction. It came from the two people I trusted most in the entire universe. My husband, David, and my best friend, Emily. If you've ever had your sense of reality completely demolished, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. It all started, as these things often do, with a feeling, a subtle shift, like the air suddenly getting colder, even indoors. David, my husband of 7 years, had become distant, more secretive with his phone, late nights at work, a general air of preoccupation. And Emily, my confidant since college, the person I shared everything with, my triumphs, my fears, my deepest secrets. She was suddenly too busy for our usual coffee dates. Her once open demeanor now guarded, almost evasive. "He's just stressed with work, Sarah," Emily had reassured me just weeks before, her hand on my arm, her eyes seemingly full of concern. "You know how intense David's job is. He's probably just trying to keep it together." And I, foolish, trusting me, believed her? Why wouldn't I? She was Emily, my rock, my sister by choice, the person who knew all my flaws and loved me anyway, the person who had helped me pick out my wedding dress, who had stood by my side as my maid of honor, who had celebrated every milestone with me. Oh, if only I knew then what I know now. Trust me, you won't believe what happened next. But first, if you've ever felt utterly betrayed by someone you loved, or had your world turned upside down, hit that like and subscribe button, and drop your story in the comments below, because we're all in this wild ride called life together. And sometimes, just knowing you're not alone helps. Our life, on the surface, was a picture of suburban bliss. A beautiful house in a nice neighborhood, 2 steady careers. David was a promising executive in a marketing firm, and I was a successful freelance graphic designer, and the quiet hum of a comfortable, predictable future. We had our routines: morning coffee together, evening walks with our golden retriever, weekend trips. It was safe, or so I thought. Looking back, the signs were there, subtle at first, like tiny cracks in a perfect facade. David had always been charming, charismatic, the life of the party. I was more introverted, content with my art and our quiet life. He was the one who encouraged me to be more outgoing, to socialize more. Emily, coincidentally, was also very outgoing, very vivacious. She was the perfect complement to David's energy and to my more reserved nature. Their bond had always been tight, a little too tight, some might have whispered, but I dismissed it as jealousy. They laughed at the same jokes, finished each other's sentences. They had this effortless banter that sometimes left me feeling like an outsider, a silent observer in their shared world. But I just rationalized it. They were both extroverts, after all, and Emily was my best friend. What could possibly be wrong? David had a way of making me feel small, not overtly, not violently, but subtly. He was a master of gaslighting, though I didn't have the word for it then. If I expressed a concern, he'd dismiss it as overreacting. If I felt neglected, he'd say, "You're being too needy. Sarah, I'm working hard for us." My emotions were always too much, my needs unreasonable. He was the stable, rational one, and I was the emotional, irrational wife. Over time, I started to believe it, to doubt my own perceptions, to shrink my needs to fit into his narrative of our relationship. "You're so lucky to have David, Sarah," Emily would often say, her eyes wide and innocent. "He's so driven, so smart. He really knows how to handle things." It was always subtly reinforcing David's superiority, and by extension, my reliance on him. And I, in my naive trust, just soaked it up, never realizing she was slowly, methodically, chipping away at my self-esteem, making me more dependent, more vulnerable. Financially, David had always taken the lead. He managed our joint accounts, handled the investments, paid the bills. "You're the artist, Sarah," he'd often say with a charming smile. "You focus on your beautiful designs. I'll handle the boring money stuff. That's my expertise. And I, trusting his apparent competence and wanting to avoid the boring parts of adulting, happily agreed. I had my own separate accounts for my freelance income. But most of it went into our joint savings, managed by him. I didn't question it. Why would I? We were a team. The revelation came, not with a bang, but with a whimper. A single innocuous email. I was working late on a client project. David was supposedly at a conference, and Emily was visiting her sister. My laptop battery died. I grabbed David's laptop to quickly send an email. It was unlocked. And there it was. Not in his email, not in his messages, but in a chat application I didn't even know he used. A conversation between David and Emily. It wasn't just a casual chat. It was intimate, full of pet names, inside jokes, and plans. Plans for their future. Plans that explicitly excluded me. They talked about our house, about my investments, about how easy it would be to deal with Sarah in the divorce. They laughed about my naivete, my trusting nature. Emily, my best friend, was calling me gullible. David, my husband, was calling me a burden. My breath hitched. My hands started to tremble, the laptop shaking in my grasp. The words on the screen blurred, then sharpened, stabbing into my heart like shards of glass. It wasn't a suspicion anymore. It was a cold, hard, undeniable truth. My husband was having an affair with my best friend, and they had been planning my demise, systematically, cruelly, behind my back. The shock was so profound it bordered on physical pain. It felt like every cell in my body was screaming. The world tilted on its axis. The perfect illusion I had lived in for years crumbled around me, revealing the rotting core beneath. The gaslighting, the subtle dismissals, the financial control. It all clicked into place, pieces of a horrifying puzzle. They weren't just cheating, they were conspiring. I don't remember much of the next few hours. A haze of nausea, a pounding headache, and the sickening feeling of betrayal. I felt dirty, used, utterly worthless. How could I have been so blind, so foolish? They had woven such an intricate web of lies, and I had walked right into it, smiling all the way. When David finally came home, a little after midnight, smelling faintly of cheap perfume and stale lies, I was waiting. The laptop was open on the kitchen counter, the incriminating chat log glaring up at him. He walked in, whistling a jaunty tune, then stopped dead when he saw my face. The color drained from his. His eyes darted to the laptop, then back to me, fear flickering in them. "Sarah, what's wrong? What are you doing with my laptop?" His voice was a pathetic attempt at casualness. I looked at him, my eyes burning with a cold fury I didn't know I possessed. "Don't you dare," I whispered, my voice trembling but steady. "Don't you dare pretend." I pointed a shaking finger at the screen. "You and Emily, my best friend, you snake." His bravado instantly crumbled. He stammered, mumbled, tried to deny it, tried to spin it. "Sarah, it's not what you think. It's a misunderstanding. Emily and I were just venting. We were stressed. It means nothing. It means you've been lying to me, manipulating me, planning to leave me for months." I finally yelled, the dam breaking. Tears streamed down my face, hot and furious. "You called me naive, gullible. You laughed at me after everything." He stopped trying to deny it. A flicker of something ugly crossed his face. Annoyance, resentment at being caught. "Look, Sarah," he said, his voice hardening. "It's not ideal, I know. But we fell in love. These things happen. Emily and I, we're good together. We're on the same page. You're different. You're too sensitive, too emotional. We just want different things." He actually used my emotions, my sensitivity, as a reason for his betrayal. The irony was so bitter, it made me want to scream. The man who had spent years systematically eroding my self-worth, now using the very traits he fostered to justify abandoning me. "Get out," I choked out, pointing to the door. "Get out of my house, now." He hesitated, then shrugged, a look of almost relief on his face. "Fine. But just so you know, Sarah, this is for the best. You'll be fine. You always land on your feet. Just don't make this difficult. We can keep it civil. Civil after he had just detonated my entire life? He actually thought I'd be civil. The next morning, the doorbell rang. It was Emily. She stood on my porch, dressed in her usual carefully curated casual chic, her face a mask of fake concern. "Sarah, oh my God. David called me. He told me everything. I am so sorry. I don't know what happened. It was a mistake. A moment of weakness. Please tell me you can forgive me. You're my best friend." Her eyes, usually so expressive, were strangely flat. I looked at her, the woman I had shared every secret with, every joy, every sorrow, the woman who had sworn to be my sister, and I saw nothing but a calculating, manipulative schemer. The memory of her calling me gullible burned in my mind. "Get off my property, Emily," I said, my voice cold, devoid of emotion. "You are not my friend. You are a betrayer, and you disgust me." Her mask slipped. A flicker of anger, of defiance, crossed her face. "Fine," she snapped, her voice hard. "Be that way. You'll regret this. Sarah, David and I, we're happy. We're moving forward. You'll be alone and bitter." And with that, she turned and walked away. A casual dismissal that cut deeper than any scream. Left alone in the wreckage of my life, the initial shock gave way to a searing, agonizing pain. I had lost everything: my husband, my best friend, my sense of security, and the very foundation of my trust in others. They had not only betrayed me, but had done so with a sickening sense of entitlement and disdain. But beneath the pain, a tiny, burning ember began to glow. An ember of fierce, unyielding resolve. They wanted me to be alone and bitter. Oh, no. I was going to be alone and powerful. And this was just the beginning of how I would rebuild my life, piece by painful piece. This was the start of my fight for justice. The days following David's and Emily's callous departure were a blur of raw, visceral pain. It wasn't just the heartbreak. It was the profound sense of disorientation. It felt like I was living in a nightmare, one where the foundations of my reality had shattered. Every corner of our beautiful home, every photograph, every shared memory, was tainted by the bitter truth of their betrayal. The initial shock gave way to waves of nausea, headaches that pulsed behind my eyes, and a terrifying inability to eat or sleep. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction, every conversation, the gaslighting, the dismissals, the subtle manipulations, David's charming smile when he'd tell me I was too emotional or too sensitive to handle our finances, Emily's seemingly innocent comments about how lucky I was to have David, how supportive he was. Every word, every glance, now replayed through the lens of their calculated deception. It was like a dark, insidious puzzle piece finally clicking into place, revealing a horrifying picture. The countless times David had subtly undermined my confidence in my design work, suggesting my ideas were too artistic or not commercial enough. The way he'd always handle our joint bank accounts, assuring me he was taking care of everything, while in reality, he was likely funneling funds or making questionable investments behind my back. He had always controlled the narrative, and I, trusting him blindly, had allowed him to. And Emily. Oh, Emily, the best friend who had become my greatest betrayer. She had been privy to my deepest insecurities, my fears, my vulnerabilities. I had shared my marital woes with her, seeking her advice, never once suspecting that she was not only complicit, but an active participant in my husband's deception. She knew about my anxieties over money, about my childhood experiences with feeling inadequate, and she used it. She preyed on my trusting nature, making me feel secure while systematically dismantling my life from the inside out. The worst part was the self-blame. How could I have been so blind, I'd whisper to myself, curled up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket that offered no comfort. How could I have missed all the signs? Was I really that naive? That gullible, the labels Emily had used for me. Gullible. Burden, echoed in my mind, confirming my deepest fears about myself. I tried to reach out to my own family, but my parents, while sympathetic, didn't fully grasp the depth of the betrayal. "Oh, Sarah, "Dear, these things happen," my mom would say, trying to sound comforting. "Divorce is messy. Just focus on moving on." They didn't understand that this wasn't just a divorce. It was an act of psychological warfare, a calculated demolition of my trust and my reality. For a few days, I was paralyzed. The pain was so intense, I could barely function. Eating felt impossible. Sleep was a distant memory. My freelance design work, my creative outlet and financial lifeline, became an insurmountable chore. I stared at my computer screen, but my mind was blank, filled only with the looping images of their betrayal. It was my other friend, Chloe, who finally pulled me out of the abyss. Chloe, whom I'd met years ago through a professional design conference, was a fierce, no-nonsense woman with a sharp wit and an even sharper sense of justice. She hadn't been as close to Emily, always having a slight, unarticulated reservation about her. She showed up at my door unannounced, a casserole in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. She found me in a crumpled heap, looking like a ghost. "Sarah," she said, her voice soft but firm, "this ends now." She didn't offer platitudes. She didn't try to minimize my pain. She just sat down beside me, holding my hand, letting me cry until there were no more tears left. "I don't know what to do. Chloe," I sobbed, my voice raw. "They took everything, my home, my trust, my sanity. I feel empty." "They didn't take everything," she corrected, her eyes blazing with conviction. "They tried, but they didn't. You're still here. You're still you, and you are stronger than you know." She spent the next few days with me, gently nudging me back to life. She made sure I ate, that I showered, that I got at least a few hours of sleep. But more importantly, she started asking questions, prompting me to articulate the depth of David's and Emily's manipulation. "You said David handled all the joint finances, right?" she asked one morning, stirring coffee. "Did you ever see the statements? Did you have access to everything?" "Not really," I admitted, feeling a flush of shame. "He always said he'd handle it, that I didn't need to worry. He'd just give me a number to transfer my freelance earnings to. I trusted him." Chloe frowned. "That's a huge red flag, Sarah. Financial control is a massive part of emotional abuse. And given what you found in that chat log, are you sure he didn't do anything shady with your money or our money?" Her words were a cold splash of water. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the financial vulnerability he had deliberately created, the power imbalance he had exploited. He didn't just break my heart, he jeopardized my future. "You need to get a lawyer, Sarah," Chloe stated, her voice leaving no room for argument. "And not just any lawyer. You need a shark, someone who specializes in complex divorces, especially with financial irregularities and infidelity. Someone who will fight for you." The thought of facing David and Emily in court, of reliving the betrayal, filled me with dread. But Chloe's words ignited a tiny spark of something new within me, righteous anger. They thought they could just walk away, leaving me in the dust, financially vulnerable and emotionally broken. Oh, no, not a chance. Chloe connected me with Ms. Evelyn Hayes, a formidable divorce attorney known for her sharp intellect and unwavering dedication to her clients. Ms. Hayes was an older woman with a calm demeanor but eyes that missed nothing. In our first meeting, I poured out my story, the tears flowing freely, the shame burning hot on my cheeks. Ms. Hayes listened patiently, taking notes, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she looked at me, her gaze piercing. "Sarah," she said, her voice gravelly but kind. "First, let's address the self-blame. You were not naive. You were trusting, and they exploited that trust. That speaks to their character, not yours." Those words, so simple yet so powerful, were like a balm to my raw soul. For the first time, someone had validated my feelings, exonerated me from the crushing weight of self-incrimination. "Now," she continued, "let's talk about getting you justice, based on what you've told me, particularly David's control over your joint finances and that chat log with Emily. We have strong grounds to investigate financial misconduct and marital fraud. This isn't just a simple divorce. This is a case of premeditated betrayal and possibly theft." My head snapped up. "Theft?" "Potentially," she confirmed. If he was actively siphoning funds or making investments in his or Emily's name using joint marital assets without your knowledge or consent, that's more than just an affair. That's a criminal act in some contexts, and it certainly impacts asset division in a divorce. Ms. Hayes immediately put her team to work. They started digging, meticulously combing through years of financial records, bank statements, investment portfolios, everything David had supposedly been managing. They hired forensic accountants. They investigated Emily's financial history as well, given her clear complicity in the plan. The process was excruciating. Every document I had to review, every question Ms. Hayes asked about David's behavior, brought back the pain. But with each piece of evidence, each new discovery, the fog of self-blame began to lift, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. We discovered that David had indeed been subtly siphoning funds from our joint savings into a separate account he'd opened, ostensibly for business investments, but which his chat logs revealed was a shared fund with Emily. He had also taken out a significant loan against our joint assets, claiming it was for a company expansion. But the money had seemingly vanished, and Emily, who had always claimed to be struggling financially, had recently purchased a luxury car and put a substantial down payment on a new apartment. The timeline matched David's suspicious business trips and late nights. They had been meticulously planning their new life, using my money to fund it. The anger surged, powerful and cleansing. It wasn't just about my broken heart anymore. It was about their calculated deception, their blatant disregard for my future, their arrogant assumption that I was too naive to ever uncover their scheme. They thought they were so clever, so untouchable. They're going to pay for this, Sarah, Ms. Hayes vowed, her eyes steely. Every single penny, and then some. Armed with Miss Hayes's legal prowess and Chloe's unwavering support, I started to slowly, painstakingly, rebuild my life. I threw myself back into my design work, finding solace and purpose in creation. I started working out again, channeling my anger into physical strength. I began therapy, processing the trauma, learning to trust my own instincts again. The pain was still there, a dull ache beneath the surface, but it no longer paralyzed me. It fueled me. David and Emily had tried to break me, to leave me financially destitute and emotionally shattered, but they had underestimated me. They had mistaken my trusting nature for weakness. And they were about to learn that the gullible wife was not only resilient, but was coming for everything they had stolen. The unraveling of my reality had led me to the edge, but it had also shown me the incredible strength I possessed, a strength I would unleash in the battle for justice ahead. The immediate aftermath of discovery was like living in a broken mirror. Every reflection of my past life with David and Emily was distorted, twisted into something ugly and unrecognizable. But as the initial haze of shock and despair slowly began to lift, a new, unfamiliar sensation began to take root within me. Anger, not a hot, destructive rage, but a cold, sharp, and incredibly focused fury. It was the kind of anger that fueled, rather than consumed. And it was that anger that became the foundation for my resolve to rise from the ashes of betrayal. My lawyer, Miss Evelyn Hayes, was an absolute godsend. She wasn't just a legal expert, she was a strategic mastermind. In our follow-up meetings, she laid out the grim reality of David's financial manipulations. He hadn't just been siphoning funds. He had taken out a substantial second mortgage on our jointly owned house, without my knowledge or consent, claiming it was for a business expansion. The money, of course, had vanished into the same black hole of shared accounts with Emily, likely funding their lavish dates and Emily's new car and apartment down payment. He'd even used my personal credit lines, linked to our joint accounts, for purchases that clearly benefited him and Emily, not our marital home or my business. This is clear financial fraud, Sarah, Miss Hayes stated, her voice calm but firm. It's not just infidelity, it's a calculated scheme to defraud you of your marital assets and to leave you vulnerable. And Emily's complicity, knowing the funds were likely from this scheme and actively benefiting from them, makes her a party to this. Hearing the words financial fraud and theft attached to David's actions, and seeing Emily implicated so directly, stripped away the last vestiges of my self-blame. This wasn't about me being naive or gullible. This was about them being criminals. The realization was both horrifying and incredibly empowering. It meant I wasn't just a victim. I was someone who had been deliberately wronged, and who now had every right to fight for justice. My first step in rising from those ashes was to take back control of my finances. Miss Hayes advised me to immediately freeze any joint accounts I had access to and open new, separate accounts for my freelance income. It was a terrifying move, but a necessary one. David had always managed everything, and the thought of navigating banks, investments, and bills on my own was daunting. But I did it. I walked into my bank, my hands shaking, and opened a new checking and savings account under my maiden name. It was a small act, but it felt like a monumental step towards reclaiming my independence. Next, Miss Hayes' team began the meticulous process of gathering evidence. This was the most painful part. We sifted through years of bank statements, credit card bills, and investment portfolios. Every suspicious transaction, every unexplained withdrawal, every large purchase made by David or Emily on a joint account was flagged. We pulled property records, loan documents, and communication logs. The sheer volume of their deception was staggering. It revealed a pattern of manipulation that had been going on for far longer than I had initially realized. Stretching back almost 2 years, I remember staring at a spreadsheet filled with data, seeing how David had systematically drained funds, how he'd leveraged our assets while gaslighting me about my financial illiteracy. And Emily, my best friend, was listed as the recipient of countless large transfers from David's new, secret accounts. Transfers for rent, for car payments, for vacations. My stomach churned, but my resolve hardened. They thought they were so clever. They thought they could get away with it. The emotional toll of this evidence gathering was immense. It was like peeling back layers of a festering wound. Every piece of paper, every digital record was a reminder of their calculated cruelty. There were days I wanted to give up, to just walk away and cut my losses, to escape the pain. But then I would remember David's sneering face, Emily's cold dismissal. I would remember their arrogance, their belief that they were untouchable, and the anger would surge, pushing me forward. My freelance design work became my sanctuary, my escape, and my lifeline. I poured myself into my projects, finding solace in creativity and purpose in productivity. It was hard to focus at first, but slowly. The act of creating, of bringing something beautiful into existence, helped to heal the broken parts of my soul. My clients, thankfully, were understanding, and their continued trust in my work was a powerful source of external validation when my internal well was dry. Chloe remained my unwavering pillar of support. She would come over regularly, not just to offer a shoulder to cry on, but to help me organize documents, to sit with me while I reviewed painful records, and simply to remind me that I was not alone. She celebrated every small victory, the successful transfer of funds, the discovery of a crucial piece of evidence. This isn't just about money, Sarah, she'd tell me. This is about justice. This is about taking back your power. Every piece of evidence you find is a step towards reclaiming your dignity. Beyond the legal battle, I began a journey of profound personal growth. I started seeing a therapist, someone who specialized in narcissistic abuse and trauma. She helped me understand the insidious nature of gaslighting, how it slowly erodes your self-worth and makes you doubt your own reality. She taught me tools to recognize and counter manipulation, to rebuild my boundaries, and to trust my own instincts again. Your strength isn't in your ability to endure pain, Sarah, my therapist, Dr. Ramirez, told me. It's in your ability to stand up for yourself, to define your own reality, and to protect your peace. What they did was a reflection of their sickness, not your worth. Those sessions were transformative. I started to see David not as the charming husband I thought I knew, but as a manipulator, and Emily not as the supportive best friend, but as a cunning accomplice. It was painful to shed those illusions, but it was also incredibly freeing. I was no longer bound by the false narratives they had constructed. As the evidence mounted, Miss Hayes initiated the divorce proceedings. David and Emily, initially smug and confident, were visibly shaken when they received the first filings. They had clearly expected a quick, amicable divorce, where I would simply roll over and accept whatever meager settlement David offered. They had underestimated me, assuming my emotional devastation meant I was weak. Miss Hayes made sure they knew what they were up against. Our legal team laid out the initial evidence of financial impropriety, hinting at the full extent of what we had uncovered. Their initial offers of settlement were laughable, insulting. They still believed they held all the cards. They still believed they could intimidate me. But I was no longer the shrinking, insecure wife. Every piece of evidence we uncovered, every new revelation about their deception, fueled my resolve. I had spent years giving my power away, unknowingly allowing myself to be manipulated. Now, I was taking it back, piece by painful piece. I started working out again, not just for physical health, but for mental fortitude. Boxing classes became my outlet, a way to channel my anger and frustration into something productive. Each punch, each sweat-soaked session, felt like a blow against their betrayal. I felt stronger, more centered, more capable. I even reconnected with old friends I had drifted away from during my marriage. People who knew the old Sarah, the one before David's subtle control had taken hold. Their genuine warmth and non-judgmental support were incredibly healing. They reminded me of who I was before the layers of gaslighting and manipulation. The path to healing was not linear. There were days when the grief would still overwhelm me. Days when I questioned if I had the strength to see it through. But then, I'd remember Ms. Hayes' calm confidence, Chloe's fierce loyalty, and Dr. Ramirez's insightful guidance. And I'd remember the faces of David and Emily, their smirks, their dismissals. That image became my shield, my constant reminder of what I was fighting for, not just justice, but my own freedom and peace. The battle lines were drawn. David and Emily had their legal team, their arrogant confidence, and their carefully constructed lies. But I had Ms. Hayes, a mountain of irrefutable evidence, and a burning, unshakable determination to reclaim my life. The divorce proceedings were about to escalate into a full-blown strategic chess match, and I was ready to play to win. This wasn't just about a broken marriage. It was about exposing the truth, securing justice, and finally, unequivocally, leaving the ashes of betrayal behind to forge a new, stronger version of myself. The moment Miss Hayes filed the official divorce petition, the gloves came off. David and Emily, who had initially believed I would be a quiet, emotionally broken doormat, realized they were facing a fight, and they responded exactly as I expected with a relentless, often disgusting campaign of manipulation and smear tactics. This wasn't just a legal battle, it was a strategic chess match, played out in courtrooms, through legal documents, and even, sickeningly, through our mutual social circles. Their first move was to try and control the narrative. David, ever the charmer, started telling our mutual friends and even some family members a carefully crafted version of events. I was portrayed as unstable, overly emotional, and difficult. He painted himself as the victim, a loving husband driven away by an unreasonable wife. Emily, the supposed innocent party, caught in the crossfire, corroborated his story, offering tearful apologies to people, claiming she had no idea of the depths of David's unhappiness. "She's just lashing out," Emily would apparently tell people, her voice dripping with fake pity. "It's sad, really. David tried so hard. But Sarah, she's just not well." It was infuriating. I heard snippets of these conversations through sympathetic friends who still believed in me. My stomach would churn, and my hands would clench. They were trying to discredit me, to make me seem crazy, to erode my credibility before I even got to court. This was textbook gaslighting, amplified for public consumption. But I had Ms. Hayes, and I had Chloe, my unwavering support system. "Let them talk, Sarah," Miss Hayes advised, her eyes sharp. "Every lie they tell, every attempt to defame you, just strengthens our case for their character, or lack thereof. We're not playing their game of public opinion. We're playing the long game, with facts. And the facts we had were damning. Ms. Hayes' team, with the help of the forensic accountants, had unearthed a truly astonishing amount of financial misconduct. We found evidence that David had not only taken out that second mortgage on our house, but had also liquidated a significant portion of my inherited investment portfolio, a portfolio I had managed myself before we got married, and which David had convinced me to consolidate into our joint accounts for better management. He'd invested a large chunk of my inheritance into a series of highly speculative, high-risk ventures that were quickly tanking, likely in an attempt to make quick money to fund his and Emily's lavish lifestyle, or to hide funds from me. Even worse, we discovered that David had created a shell company, ostensibly for future business projects, but which was in reality a vehicle to funnel money to Emily, disguised as consulting fees. The paper trail was meticulous, revealing a pattern of financial deception that stretched back years. It wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment affair fueled by passion. It was a cold, calculated plan to leave me financially destitute. The first court appearance was a preliminary hearing, a formality, but for me, it felt like gladiatorial combat. David walked in, impeccably dressed, a picture of calm confidence, almost smug. Emily was by his side, looking demure, her eyes downcast, playing the role of the remorseful friend perfectly. They glanced at me, a quick, dismissive look that said, "You're nothing." But I wasn't nothing. I was armed, not with anger, but with facts. Ms. Hayes was a force of nature, calm, methodical, and utterly ruthless. She started by presenting our initial motion for temporary spousal support, a standard request. But then, she quietly introduced the concept of dissipation of marital assets, laying out the preliminary evidence of the second mortgage, the liquidated investments, and the suspicious transfers to Emily's consulting firm. David's lawyer, a slick, arrogant man named Mr. Thompson, immediately jumped up, objecting furiously. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. My client is a respected businessman. These are baseless accusations designed to slander his good name." Ms. Hayes just looked at him, unimpressed. "With all due respect, counsel, the evidence speaks for itself. My client has been systematically defrauded and financially manipulated. We have bank statements, wire transfers, and even text messages outlining the scheme." The judge, a formidable woman with a stern but fair demeanor, listened intently. She looked at David, who had gone pale. Emily, next to him, shifted uncomfortably, her gaze fixed on the floor. "Mr. Thompson," the judge stated, her voice quiet but firm, "I suggest you advise your client to cooperate fully with discovery. These are serious allegations, Ms. Hayes, and your preliminary evidence certainly warrants a deeper look." That was the first crack in their confident facade. They had clearly not expected me to come prepared with such detailed financial evidence. They thought I would be too emotional, too heartbroken, too unknowledgeable about finances to uncover their scheme. They had underestimated me. Again. The discovery phase that followed was a grueling, invasive process. David and Emily tried every trick in the book to stonewall us. They delayed handing over documents, claimed technical difficulties with accessing bank records, and outright denied the existence of certain accounts. David even tried to claim that the second mortgage was for a secret investment he was making for me. To surprise me later, the sheer audacity of his lies was breathtaking. But Miss Hayes was relentless. She filed motions, subpoenaed banks, and pushed back against every delay. Her forensic accountants were like bloodhounds, sniffing out every hidden asset, every suspicious transaction. We found another shell company, another series of transfers to Emily disguised as business expenses. It became clear that they had been systematically emptying our joint marital accounts, moving funds into their shared secret accounts, and then using that money to finance Emily's new lifestyle, all while David maintained the illusion of a struggling business venture to me. There was one particularly harrowing moment during depositions. I sat across from David, who tried to maintain his composure, but his eyes darted nervously. Mr. Thompson questioned me, trying to paint me as an unhinged, vengeful ex-wife. "Ms. Davis," he sneered, "isn't it true that you were often emotional and irrational during your marriage, that your husband was simply trying to protect you from the complexities of financial management?" My therapist's words echoed in my mind. "Their sickness, not your worth." I looked Mr. Thompson dead in the eye. "No, Mr. Thompson," I said, my voice clear and steady. "It's true that my husband consistently gaslighted me, undermined my confidence, and encouraged me to defer financial decisions to him. His protection was, in fact, a carefully orchestrated financial manipulation designed to defraud me, and the evidence, which you have now seen, clearly proves that." David flinched. His face flushed. Emily, who was in the room as an observer, visibly recoiled. It was a moment of true empowerment. I wasn't reacting emotionally. I was stating facts, calmly and clearly, dismantling his carefully constructed narrative, piece by piece. Later, during Emily's deposition, Ms. Hayes tore through her flimsy story. Emily tried to claim she had no idea the money David was giving her was stolen. "So, Ms. Miller," Ms. Hayes asked, her voice deceptively soft, "you're telling me you just assumed your friend David, who you knew was married and whose wife was a graphic designer with a growing business, was just generously funding your new apartment, your luxury car, and your exotic vacations out of the goodness of his heart. You never once questioned the source of these funds, despite knowing he was still legally married and claiming financial difficulties to his wife." Emily stammered, her face turning bright red. I thought he had received a bonus. He said he was doing really well at work. And yet," Ms. Hayes countered, placing a series of printouts on the table, copies of text messages between David and Emily, laughing about Sarah's cluelessness and the perfect plan. "You were actively discussing with Mr. Peterson how to handle Sarah and how to split the assets before Miss Davis even knew about the affair. You even advised him on how to best hide certain funds. Is that the behavior of someone unaware?" Emily broke. She started crying, trying to play the victim, but it was too late. The evidence was overwhelming. Her calculated complicity was undeniable. The strategic chess match was grueling. It consumed my life. Every day was a new challenge, a new hurdle. But with every victory, every piece of evidence uncovered, every small win in court, I felt myself growing stronger, more resilient. I wasn't just fighting for money. I was fighting for my dignity, for my right to be seen as a competent, intelligent woman, not a naive fool. Chloe continued to be my rock. She celebrated every step forward, reminded me to breathe, and helped me maintain my focus. "They're trying to exhaust you, Sarah," she'd say. "Don't let them. Every time you push back, you're taking your power back." And I pushed back. I fought for every asset, every penny that was rightfully mine, not out of greed, but out of principle. They had tried to steal my future, and I would not let them. I knew the final hearing was coming, the moment the judge would deliver her verdict. David and Emily were still confident, still believing their charm and their lawyer's theatrics would win the day. But they had no idea the full extent of the evidence Ms. Hayes was holding, the shocking revelation that awaited them. The chess match was nearing its end, and I was about to deliver the checkmate. The air in the courtroom on the day of the final hearing was thick with anticipation. It felt heavy, charged, like the calm before a storm. I sat beside Ms. Hayes, my heart pounding a steady rhythm against my ribs, a mixture of nerves and fierce determination. David and Emily sat across the aisle with Mr. Thompson, their faces a mask of strained confidence. David still had that arrogant tilt to his chin, but his eyes darted around the room, betraying a flicker of unease. Emily, usually so poised, kept fiddling with her pearl necklace. They had no idea what was coming. They thought they had seen all our cards. "They're still underestimating you, Sarah," Miss Hayes whispered, sensing my tension. "They think they've weathered the storm. They haven't." Her calm presence was a balm, a steady hand in the whirlwind of my emotions. The judge, Justice Eleanor Vance, entered the courtroom. She was known for her sharp intellect, her no-nonsense approach, and her uncanny ability to cut through pretense. She had overseen many high-profile divorce cases, and her reputation preceded her. I felt a surge of reassurance just looking at her composed demeanor. The proceedings began. Mr. Thompson, David's lawyer, launched into his closing arguments, painting a picture of David as a well-meaning husband caught in an unfortunate emotional entanglement with a friend, and me as a vindictive spouse attempting to extort him. He dismissed all the financial evidence as minor accounting discrepancies or misunderstandings on my part. He spoke of David's good character and Emily's deep remorse. It was a masterclass in obfuscation and character assassination, designed to muddy the waters and appeal to the judge's sympathy. Emily sat there, nodding sadly, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. I felt a cold rage building in my chest. They were still lying, still manipulating, still trying to make me out to be the villain. But I gripped Ms. Hayes's hand under the table, reminding myself to breathe. My moment was coming. Then it was Miss Hayes's turn. She didn't shout. She didn't engage in theatrics. She just spoke, her voice clear, precise, and devastatingly factual. She systematically dismantled every single one of Mr. Thompson's arguments, presenting our overwhelming evidence. She showed the judge the meticulously compiled timeline of David and Emily's affair, cross-referenced with the dates of the suspicious financial transactions. She presented the forensic accountant's report, highlighting every siphoned dollar, every fraudulent loan, every disguised transfer to Emily. "Your Honor," Ms. Hayes concluded, her voice gaining power, "this is not merely a case of marital infidelity. This is a case of calculated, premeditated financial fraud. Mr. Peterson, aided and abetted by Ms. Miller, systematically drained marital assets, including Miss Davis's significant personal inheritance, to fund their illicit relationship and future plans. They did so under the guise of financial management, actively gaslighting Ms. Davis and preying on her trust. Their actions constitute not just a breach of marital trust, but a profound and actionable financial crime." She then dropped the bombshell, the final irrefutable piece of evidence. "And Your Honor, we have one final exhibit, Exhibit 12, a recording." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. David's face went ashen. Emily's eyes snapped open, wide with terror. Mr. Thompson was on his feet in an instant. "Objection, Your Honor. This is inadmissible. We were not made aware of any recording. This is a violation of discovery," he thundered, his face red with fury. Ms. Hayes remained perfectly calm. "Your Honor, this recording was legally obtained. It is a recording of a voicemail left by Ms. Miller on Ms. Davis's phone approximately 2 months after initial separation, inadvertently revealing critical details about the extent of their financial planning and the true nature of their intentions regarding Ms. Davis's assets. It was only recently discovered due to a technical glitch and a subsequent forensic recovery of Ms. Davis's old phone data, which we immediately provided to opposing counsel as soon as it was authenticated. The judge looked at the opposing counsel. "Mr. Thompson, you were provided with all recovered data. Any technical glitch on a phone is not Ms. Hayes's fault. You had access to the raw data. Objection overruled. Play the recording. Ms. Hayes." A low hum filled the courtroom as the recording began. It was Emily's voice, slurred, clearly intoxicated, leaving a drunken voicemail for David, not me, on what must have been an old phone of mine they thought was inactive or destroyed. "Hey, babe, it's me, Emily's voice slurred from the speakers. "Ugh, this new apartment is so much better than that little hovel Sarah wanted. I can't believe we pulled it off. You genius, that second mortgage on the house, and all those transfers from her investment account. She didn't suspect a thing. She's such a gullible fool, isn't she? Honestly, how dumb do you have to be by the time she figures it out? We'll be long gone, living it up on her dime. Just make sure you cover your tracks, baby. We don't want anything coming back to bite us, especially with that new business venture you're cooking up for us, to our new life, thanks to Sarah's generosity." She ended with a cackle, a chilling, triumphant sound. The recording ended, and the silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. The air was thick with the weight of the undeniable truth. Emily's own voice, in her own words, had just condemned herself and David. She had confirmed everything: the calculated nature of their scheme, their contempt for me, and the depth of their financial fraud. David stared at the speakers, his face a ghastly shade of white, his eyes wide with horror. Emily looked like she was about to faint, her hand clamped over her mouth, her eyes darting wildly. Mr. Thompson looked utterly defeated, his shoulders slumped. The smug confidence had completely vanished, replaced by open panic. Justice Vance looked from the recording device to David and Emily, her expression stern, her gaze unwavering. Mr. Peterson, Miss Miller, she began, her voice cold and deliberate. The evidence presented today, particularly this recording, paints a very clear picture. A picture of calculated deception, financial fraud, and a blatant disregard for marital assets and trust. She then laid down her judgment, her words like hammer blows. Given the overwhelming evidence of marital misconduct, fraudulent misrepresentation, and the deliberate dissipation of marital assets by Mr. David Peterson, aided and abetted by Ms. Emily Miller, the court rules as follows. My heart pounded. This was it. First, the judge continued. The marital home, previously jointly owned, will be awarded solely to Ms. Sarah Davis, free and clear of all encumbrances, including the fraudulently obtained second mortgage, which Mr. Peterson will be solely responsible for discharging. His name will be removed from the title forthwith. A wave of relief washed over me, my home, my sanctuary, reclaimed. David's eyes widened further, a flicker of outrage crossing his face, but he dared not speak. Second, she went on, Ms. Davis's previously consolidated investment portfolio, fraudulently liquidated by Mr. Peterson, will be fully reconstituted. Mr. Peterson will be responsible for transferring an equivalent sum, including lost earnings, into a separate trust account for Mar. Davis, to be managed independently. This transfer must be completed within 30 days. This was massive, not just my inheritance back, but with the added interest and growth it would have generated. It was a complete financial restoration. David looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Third, the judge stated, her voice hardening, due to the egregious nature of the financial fraud and the deliberate attempt to defraud Ms. Davis, Mr. Peterson will be solely responsible for all outstanding marital debts, including credit card debts and any other liabilities incurred during the period of his misconduct. David's head dropped. That meant all the luxury purchases he and Emily had made on my credit lines. Everything he'd hidden was now entirely his burden. Fourth, the judge said, then paused, looking directly at Emily. Regarding Miss Emily Miller, while she is not a party to this divorce, her explicit complicity in the financial fraud, as evidenced by the recorded voicemail and the documented transfers of funds, will not go unaddressed. The court will issue a separate order compelling Ms. Miller to repay all funds demonstrably received from Mr. Peterson's fraudulently obtained assets. Furthermore, this court strongly recommends that Ms. Davis consider pursuing additional civil litigation against Ms. Miller for conspiracy to commit fraud and unjust enrichment. Emily let out a small, terrified whimper. Her face was ashen, her eyes full of despair. She hadn't just lost David. She was now facing her own legal and financial ruin. The dreams of living it up on Sarah's dime had just evaporated into thin air. Finally, Justice Vance concluded, her gaze sweeping over David and Emily. The court finds that Mr. Peterson acted with malice and deliberate intent to inflict financial and emotional harm upon Ms. Davis. Therefore, in addition to the division of assets, Mr. Peterson will pay Ms. Davis a substantial sum in punitive damages, to be determined by a subsequent hearing if an agreement cannot be reached, reflecting the severity of his misconduct and the emotional distress caused. The gavel came down with a resounding thud. Bam! The sound echoed through the silent courtroom, a definitive end to their reign of terror and a shocking revelation of true justice. David and Emily sat frozen, their faces pale, their elaborate scheme completely, utterly exposed and dismantled. They had expected to walk away, triumphant and unburdened. Instead, they were facing financial ruin and legal consequences beyond anything they could have imagined. And I, the naive, gullible wife, stood vindicated, my dignity restored, my future reclaimed. The tables had not just turned, they had flipped entirely, sending them crashing down. The sound of Justice Vance's gavel, that final, resounding bam, didn't just mark the end of a court session. For me, it was the sound of shackles breaking. It was the sound of my life, which had been hijacked and nearly destroyed by David and Emily, finally being returned to me. As I walked out of that courtroom, a profound sense of liberation washed over me. It was as if I could breathe properly for the first time in years. David and Emily, on the other hand, were utterly decimated. I saw them from a distance as I left, huddled with Mr. Thompson, their faces pale, their confident masks completely shattered. Emily was openly sobbing, her carefully applied makeup streaking down her face. David looked utterly defeated, his arrogance replaced by a hollow despair. They had planned to walk away from our marriage with my assets and their new life. Instead, they were facing financial ruin, legal battles, and the public exposure of their sordid scheme. The shocking revelation had been delivered, and its impact was devastating for them. The days and weeks that followed the verdict were surreal. The legal team, led by Ms. Hayes, worked swiftly to execute the judge's orders. David's accounts were frozen, his assets seized, and the process of recovering my liquidated inheritance began immediately. The second mortgage on my house was discharged, leaving me with clear ownership of my home, a sanctuary I truly appreciated for the first time. Every financial hurdle they had created, every attempt to leave me destitute, was systematically dismantled. For Emily, the consequences were equally severe. The order compelling her to repay the funds she had received from David's fraudulent activities, coupled with the recommendation for civil litigation against her, meant her own carefully constructed life was unraveling. I heard through the grapevine that she lost her new apartment, sold her luxury car, and was facing immense debt. Her reputation in our social circles was in tatters. She, who had reveled in calling me gullible, was now facing the grim reality of her own choices. I won't lie. There was a part of me that felt a deep satisfaction in seeing their comeuppance. Not a vengeful glee, but a quiet sense of justice served. They had acted with such malicious intent, such calculated cruelty, and now they were facing the consequences. It was a powerful lesson in accountability, but my focus quickly shifted from their downfall to my new dawn. With the legal battle behind me, and my financial security restored and even enhanced by the punitive damages, I had an unprecedented opportunity to rebuild my life, exactly as I wanted it. The first thing I did was take a long, deep breath. Then, I redecorated the house, purging it of every trace of David and the painful memories. I repainted the walls in vibrant colors, bought new furniture that reflected my own taste, and filled the spaces with art and objects that brought me joy. It was more than just decorating. It was an act of reclaiming my space, making it truly mine again. My freelance graphic design business, which I had neglected during the height of the personal turmoil, flourished. I found renewed passion in my creative work, channeling all my experiences into designs that were bolder, more authentic, more impactful. My clients noticed the shift, commenting on my renewed energy and focus. My income surged, further solidifying my financial independence. But the biggest transformation was internal. Dr. Ramirez, my therapist, helped me process the lingering trauma to heal the deep wounds of betrayal. We worked on rebuilding my trust, not just in others, but in myself. I learned to trust my instincts, to recognize red flags, and to set firm, non-negotiable boundaries in all my relationships. Your intuition was speaking to you all along, Sarah, Dr. Ramirez reminded me. You just had years of gaslighting that taught you to silence it. Now, you need to listen. You need to honor your feelings. And I did. I nurtured my healthy relationships, especially with Chloe. She was truly my rock through it all, and our bond grew even stronger. We celebrated my victories, big and small, with genuine joy and laughter. She was the sister I chose, the friend who truly had my back. I also started exploring new hobbies, things I had put on hold or given up during my marriage, because David had subtly discouraged them. I took up hiking, finding solace and strength in nature. I joined a pottery class, getting my hands dirty and reconnecting with a tactile creativity I had missed. Each new experience was an act of self-discovery, a reminder that my identity was vast and multifaceted, not defined by a broken marriage. My perspective on life, on love, and on success had fundamentally changed. I learned that true security wasn't about a marriage certificate or a joint bank account. It was about inner resilience and self-reliance. I learned that trust, once broken, can be rebuilt, but only if the foundation is honest and transparent. And I learned that my self-worth was not, and never would be, dependent on another person's validation or approval. I eventually dipped my toes back into the dating pool. Cautiously at first, I was slower to trust, more discerning, but I found a new sense of clarity in what I truly wanted in a partner: respect, honesty, emotional intelligence, and someone who celebrated my independence rather than trying to control it. And I found someone who saw me, truly saw me, for the strong, resilient, and loving woman I had become. Without any of the baggage of my past, the journey from devastation to liberation was long and arduous. There were moments of profound pain, moments where I thought I would never recover. But every tear I shed, every legal battle I endured, every moment of self-doubt I overcame, contributed to the woman I am today, stronger, wiser, and more authentically myself than I had ever been. David and Emily eventually faded into the background noise of my life. Their names became mere references in conversations about past lessons, not sources of ongoing pain. I heard snippets of their struggles: David's career stalling due to the public scandal, Emily battling financial and reputational ruin. While I didn't wish them ill, I felt no sympathy. They had chosen their path, and they were reaping what they sowed. So, if you're listening to this, and you're in a similar situation, feeling betrayed, gaslighted, or financially manipulated by someone you trusted, hear this: you are not alone. And you are stronger than you think. Don't let their narrative define you. Don't let their betrayal break you. Use your pain as fuel, not as a prison. Seek support from trusted friends, from professionals, from anyone who sees your worth. Fight for your truth. Fight for your dignity. Fight for your financial freedom. It won't be easy. There will be tears, frustration, and moments of despair. But on the other side of that battle lies true liberation. The kind of freedom that comes from knowing you stood up for yourself. You reclaimed your power, and you built a life that is truly, authentically, gloriously yours. Hit that like and subscribe button if this story resonated with you. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I truly believe in the power of shared experiences. And please, share this video with anyone who might be struggling with betrayal or manipulation, because sometimes hearing someone else's story is the first step towards writing your own new, empowered ending.